In the last video, we talked about price schedule. That is a list showing your suppliers' cost elements and therefore explaining their price. The problem is that in most cases, you'll just end up in a situation where you as the buyer or the client will just explain what you need to your supplier. And then the supplier tells you how much it will cost you to have those things done. So you end up in a fixed pricing arrangement. Fixed pricing arrangement is where you get into a contract and the price in that contract doesn't change throughout the life of that contract. These are contracts between a service provider and a client, spelling out the services the contractor agrees to provide in exchange for a fixed or set price. In order to understand this contract, let's assume that the procurement department in your organization say that they need a procurement management software. So what do you do? Well, whatever you do is, it's simple, right? You contact an IT company and these guys show up and you talk to them, you explain to them what they want. And now they tell you that in order for them to provide you with whatever it is that you want, the software, you'll have to pay them $5,000. So if that contract is of a fixed price arrangement, what that means is that once you pay them the $5,000, depending on when you are supposed to pay them the money, you will not add any more cash on top of anything, okay? Until they fix that thing and the contract is over. Basically, you pay your $5,000, you're done. Now, what the supplier will have to factor in before they throw in their price is, number one, the work breakdown structure, okay? You have to know exactly what is going to happen at what time and who's going to do it. Number two, as a supplier, you also have to know the cost of each work in the work breakdown structure. So if you have 10 things to be done, then how much will each of those 10 things cost you? The third thing is that you have to understand your time, okay? So estimate the time. Remember, time is money. So the more time you take doing this, the more it's going to cost you as a supplier in terms of fixed cost. And the problem is that the buyer is not going to increase their cost. And obviously, number four, you have to figure out how much profit you intend to make. A question might therefore be, why would you want to use this kind of arrangement? And the answer is simple, because number one, this arrangement gives the parties flexibility. Now, as a buyer, you know that, things are not going to change in terms of prices. And so once you've paid, you're done. Okay. Or even if you're going to pay at the end of the project, that's it. This is the amount you're going to pay. And as a supplier, you know that if this is what I'm going to be paid, then all I have to do is make sure that my costs fall below this level so that I can make that much profit. And the second thing is that some agencies require this kind of deal since it ensures transparency and equal opportunity to contractors. That's what you find with some of these governmental agencies, okay? If they're trying to create transparency, then they use a fixed price arrangement where everybody who is applying for that tender knows how much they're going to be paid. And the third thing is that market changes don't matter to the buyer unless a clause in the contract says otherwise. Now, in contract, you have to understand that there is something called frustration. In frustration, these are events that occur which brings further fulfillment of that contract to be impossible. So with frustrating event, the problem is that something like increase in cost may not really be a frustrating event. So if a buyer insists on this kind of contract and you accept as a seller without doing your math properly, and then later, unless otherwise stated, your costs go up, the buyer is not going to increase the money. So these are one of those advantages that goes to the buyer. Of course, this arrangement also has a downside, and such include, in the event of market changes, those are going to affect the seller, okay? And the buyer will also be affected because they are trading the certainty of price, which means they're going to pay a higher price. Since if as a seller, okay, or a supplier, you say, we are going to do this, and this is the fixed price, and then again, you know that in future things can occur, then it means that price will obviously be higher because you're trying to sort of pad the price to safeguard yourself against future inevitability. Fixed price contracts can be classified in a number of ways, such as number one, firm fixed price contract. So this can also be referred to as fixed price contracts. In this contract, the person buying the goods or services pay the seller a fixed amount that does not vary even if the unexpected cost arises or additional resources are needed. This contract can therefore be used when you're purchasing things like commercial items, supplies, or even services. So the thing to remember with this contract is that if you're going to use them, then you have to make sure that the requirements are well defined. As a contractor, ensure that you're experienced enough to know what it will take for you to complete that contract. And by what you take, I mean how much it will cost you to complete that contract. You also have to understand the market conditions, okay? Remember, fluctuations in the market may not really favor you. And then again, as a supplier, you also have to ensure that you understand what is at risk financially. The second kind of contract under fixed pricing arrangement is fixed price with incentive. So the thing about this contract is that they have a ceiling price. That is the price above which the buyer will not go. So the seller will have to ensure that they've managed their cost. Okay, they don't go above the target cost with these kind of contracts. So in this contract, the seller and the buyer will have to make sure that from the beginning, they understand how they're going to evaluate performance in this contract. And usually that will include things like cost, schedules, technical performance, etc. So the contract will therefore show target cost, target profit, a price ceiling, and a profit adjustment formula. Third type of contract that falls under the fixed pricing arrangement is fixed price with adjustment. This type of contract establishes a basis for measuring fluctuations so that the price adjustments are limited to contingencies beyond the supplier's control and reflect actual market fluctuations. Now, there are two kinds of adjustments in this contract, the upward adjustment and the downward adjustment. So an upward adjustment will be taken care of by setting a ceiling price. So as a buyer, you're pretty much saying that should things go out of hand and prices escalate, then this is how much I'm probably going to chip in as a buyer. Of course, with the downward adjustment, it's just the reverse of that. Sometimes the prices will come down. And so the problem is that normally in other contracts, if the price comes down, that is to the advantage of the supplier. But in this case, you could have a provision that also explains what happens if the prices go down and how that will affect the cost of that contract. So if you're going to use any of these contracts, okay, if you're going to use any of the three contracts that you've just mentioned, then you should make sure that the requirements are clearly defined in advance, the work is not complex, the project is small, and there are few changes in the project scope. Up to there, I'm hoping that you're in a position to explain what fixed pricing arrangement is by giving a practical example, as well as giving advantages and disadvantages, or basically when to use them and not to use them. You should also be in a position to explain the various types of contracts that fall under fixed pricing arrangements. If there is any question, do let me know. I'm Moses from Zeret Network, and I'll see you in the next video.